Okay, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating tension that's sitting right at the center of how we work today. So on one side, you've got the classic, old-school corporate playbook, right? Project raw strength, hide your flaws, and always look perfectly competent. But on the other side, we've got this massive, growing mountain of behavioral science telling us that this whole strength-first approach is actually destroying our ability to lead effectively. So today's Explainer is all about the new rules of leadership. We're going to see how vulnerability and genuine interpersonal trust are quietly taking down the old myth of corporate invincibility. Honestly, if you've ever felt like you have to strap on a suit of armor just to go to work, this Explainer is absolutely going to change how you look at your professional relationships. You know, it's a question that has haunted leaders for literally hundreds of years. Niccolo Machiavelli famously chewed on this one, and he kind of hedged his bets, but ultimately he concluded that if you can't be both, it's definitely safer to be feared. And the crazy thing? A lot of modern management still operates on this exact same 16th century assumption. We just assume that if we project unyielding strength, nobody will challenge our authority. We tell ourselves that being lovable or warm is, a nice bonus, or worse, a glaring sign of weakness. But when we actually put Machiavelli's theory to the test using modern data, the results tell a completely different story.
Get a load of this number. 1 in 2,000. Researchers Jack Zenger and Joseph Folkman looked at a massive data set. We're talking over 51,000 leaders. They basically wanted to know, can you be a highly unlikable, feared boss, but still be rated as a highly effective leader? Out of all those thousands of people, only 27 pulled it off. 27! That means your chances of being a strongly disliked, strength-first manager who is actually considered a good leader are literally about 1 in 2,000. It turns out, fear doesn't drive results. It drives cognitive shutdown, it drives disengagement, and it creates a super toxic, every person for themselves kind of culture.
Researchers actually have a name for this dynamic. They call it the competence trap. We've all been there, right? You start a new job or you walk into a really high-stakes meeting, and your gut instinct is to lead with strength. You want to prove you belong there, so you drop some hints about your credentials or talk about how late you worked last night. But leading with strength first almost always backfires. It elicits fear or maybe just outward compliance, and sometimes even envy. On the flip side, though, leading with warmth first does something kind of magical. It acts as a conduit. Warmth proves your intentions are good, which builds trust, gets people sharing ideas openly, and ultimately earns you genuine admiration.
The psychology here is just fascinating. Based on research by Amy Cuddy, Susan Fisk, and Peter Glick, we can actually map out exactly how people react when you mix competence and warmth. Think about it like this. If you are super competent but entirely lacking in warmth, you don't actually get respect, you get envy, which can honestly lead to active sabotage. Now flip it. Lots of warmth but very low competence, that just gets you pity. But when you manage to combine high competence with high warmth, that's the jackpot. That is the only combination that unlocks true admiration and gets your team actively engaged. It's the ultimate sweet spot of leadership.
Section 1. Warmth builds trust. So why is warmth so undeniably powerful? Well, it actually comes down to our biology. Before our human brains even begin to process how smart or capable someone is, we are subconsciously asking one incredibly vital question. What are this person's intentions toward me? That's warmth. Social psychologist Alex Todorov at Princeton found that we pick up on warmth way faster than competence when making snap judgments. Think about it. If your brain doesn't register that a leader's intentions are safe, it literally doesn't matter how capable they are of executing those intentions. You're just going to naturally resist their influence. Warmth is the key that unlocks the door so your competence can actually be heard.
Section 2. The vulnerability advantage.
To build that kind of authentic warmth, we have to completely rethink a concept that gets incredibly misunderstood: vulnerability. Whenever we hear that word in a corporate setting, we immediately think of weakness, or oversharing, or just being submissive. But if you look at the massive body of work by social connection expert Brené Brown, vulnerability is the exact opposite of that. It's literally the courage to be yourself. It means finally dropping that exhausting facade of professional distance and replacing it with real emotional exposure. It's having the guts to admit you don't have all the answers, taking risks, and just leaning into uncertainty.
And look, this isn't just touchy-feely theory. It translates into highly practical, everyday actions. Practicing vulnerability is standing up in a status meeting and saying, hey, I completely messed this up, and here's how I'm taking responsibility for it. It's looking at a junior employee and genuinely asking them for their help. It means noticing when a coworker is going through a personal tragedy and actually sitting with them in that grief, instead of just forwarding some polite HR-approved email. It's sharing your own honest doubts when the company hits a rough patch. It proves that you are a real human, not just a corporate mouthpiece.
I want to share a quote that brilliantly captures what happens when we don't practice vulnerability. This came from a top executive at a Fortune 100 company during a leadership workshop run by Johan Berlin. They did this really simple exercise where colleagues shared a significant life event. And this executive realized he had worked alongside a peer for a quarter of a century without ever knowing his struggles. Just let that sink in. 25 years of collaboration, completely devoid of genuine human connection, all because they were taught to project this sterile image of absolute competence. What a staggering loss of trust and camaraderie.
Which brings us to Section 3, Discovering Authentic Leadership.
Overcoming years of sterile corporate programming isn't easy, for sure. But the blueprint is right there in Daniel Goleman's groundbreaking work on emotional intelligence. EQ isn't some abstract, mystical personality trait. It's a completely learnable framework. It starts at the base with self-awareness, having a truly realistic assessment of your own blind spots. Then it steps up to self-regulation, managing your own moods so you aren't dumping your stress onto your team. Next is empathy, reading the room, truly considering others' feelings, and finally, social skill, bringing it all together to build rapport. Mastering these steps is exactly how a leader learns to be appropriately vulnerable.
But I'm not going to lie, getting to that level of self-awareness can be seriously painful. Take a look at this quote from David Pottruck, the former CEO of Charles Schwab. He genuinely thought he was a fantastic leader until his boss, frankly, sat him down and told him his colleagues simply didn't trust him. He literally called the feedback a dagger to the heart. Denial is arguably the single greatest hurdle any leader faces, right? Our egos desperately want to be stroked, but an authentic leader has to be willing to hear the exact feedback they are most terrified of hearing and then use it to dismantle their blind spots.
And as we try to process that kind of tough feedback, psychologist Mark Snyder points out that we typically fall into one of two profiles. On one side, we have chameleons. These folks adapt effortlessly to any situation, constantly managing their image. But because they mask their true vulnerability with bluster, they can come off as fake or lacking a moral center. On the other side, we have the true-to-selfers. They express exactly what they feel, which is super authentic, but they risk massive oversharing. If a true-to-selfer over-indexes on approachability, they can accidentally drain their own authority and make their team super anxious.
So clearly, the goal isn't to be purely a shape-shifting chameleon or an oversharing true-to-selfer. The goal, as authors Amy Jen Su and Muriel Mannion Wilkins frame it, is finding your signature voice. This is the ultimate sweet spot. It's the ability to articulate your own unique, authentic value while simultaneously connecting with others in a way that actually influences them. It basically means you aren't acting like a corporate robot, but you also aren't treating your team like your personal therapists. You are authentically you, but calibrated to serve the people you're leading.
Section 4. The Happy Warrior Balance.
Once you really master that signature voice, you step into this amazing behavioral profile that researchers call the happy warrior. And what's wild is that this is actually reflected in our biology. These leaders naturally have high testosterone, which gives them assertiveness and a willingness to take risks, but crucially, they also have very low cortisol, meaning they stay incredibly calm and non-reactive when the pressure's on. And to top it off, healthy levels of oxytocin, which facilitates that crucial warmth and attachment. Think of the late Ann Richards, the former governor of Texas. She paired this incredibly sharp assertiveness with a massive smile and quick wit. Leaders like that just assure us that no matter how bad a crisis gets, we're going to be okay.
Okay, so how do we actually do this? How do we literally embody this happy warrior energy and connect before we lead? Well, there are some incredibly powerful research-backed tactics you can try today. First, consciously validate people's feelings before pushing your own agenda. Show them you see things from their side. Second, try lowering the pitch and volume of your voice slightly. It signals that you're leveling with them as an equal, not performing. Third, before that big meeting, adopt expansive, space-occupying postures, like a Wonder Woman pose. It actually lowers your own stress hormones. And finally, just acknowledge the elephant in the room. If everyone is terrified about budget cuts, look them in the eye and say it out loud. It proves you've got their back.
And that brings us to the biggest takeaway for today. When you walk into your next team meeting or when you log on to your next high-stakes video call, I want you to ask yourself, are you leading with your armor up, desperately trying to prove your competence and projecting fear? Or are you connecting first? Are you brave enough to be a little vulnerable, to show some genuine warmth, and to build the kind of deep trust that makes real influence possible? The data couldn't be clearer.
Warmth isn't a weakness, it is the absolute ultimate leadership advantage. Take that thought with you today, and we'll see you on the next Explainer.